All righty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the GSFE Admins Podcast, a podcast by and for GSFE admins. My name is Lance Lennon. I'm the Technology Director for the Eagle Grove Community School District, a small school district in north central Iowa.
Hey guys, I'm Phil Trimble, Pocahontas Area Community School District IT Director.
And chat has the playing in the background, so clearly we're streaming.
We are streaming. I apologize. I couldn't click mute fast enough. We're now muted. So, my name is Chad Ferricks. I have some news to share. I'm currently the Tech Director for Spirit Lake Community School District in Northwest Iowa, but I will be done there in about 1 week's time, 1 week and a day. I am switching gigs, going to work for a place near Des Moines, Iowa called Adele DeSoto Minburn. Kind of a mid-year switch here. They'll be going one-to-one with Chromebooks, grades 3 through 12 in the fall. So they needed someone with experience doing such a thing, and I have a little bit. So off I go, switching gigs. So
congratulations, Chad.
Thank you, Phil.
And as you may have noticed, we do have a special guest with us today. Would you care to introduce yourself, Cyrus?
Hi, everyone. My name is CYRUS MISTRY. I'm a group product manager at Google. I'm responsible for Chromebooks in education. In addition, more recently, small and medium business. And I have a fantastic team of product managers that are responsible for all of the education features and bringing Chromebooks to education worldwide.
Well, we are delighted to have you on the show, Cyrus. We've talked about in the past, you know, it's kind of those moments we have in the GSFE admins community where certain people you have to ask to join, and certain people ask to join, and you kind of have that fanboy moment. And when Cyrus asked to join, Carl actually was the one that approved your membership and made me incredibly jealous because I think Cyrus is underselling himself. And in our opinion, Cyrus is kind of the brains from everything I've heard. You're kind of the brains behind the Chrome operating system. I mean, it's your baby. Am I correct?
I don't know about the whole operating system. I would say the limit of my brains when I was on the founding team of Chrome OS 8 years ago, which was an awesome team. And I still remember when I joined, the vice president at the time asked me, what do you want to do if you join as a product manager? And I said, I think this product will do well in schools and businesses. And so that's actually what I did. I decided we needed an admin console. I found some engineers to put the very first policy up there, which was setting a proxy. Actually, it was the very first little tidbit of information. Because if you had a proxy network, you couldn't connect, and you needed some way to tell the device about that proxy from the very beginning. So, so I did that, and I was part of the very first CR48 launch. You know, I was given 16,000 devices to give away to schools and businesses, which is very exciting. And schools started saying, "When can you take my money and get me these for real?" So we thought maybe thing here. That was at the end of 2010, and most of you know how the story ended, I guess.
Yeah. So what is the current market share? What is the Chromebook in the education space? So we'll talk K-12 in America, in the United States. What do you guys have at this point? Do you know the number?
K-12 in the U.S., this is not according to us, it's according to analyst groups that do all the publishing. We are at roughly 2/3, so 2 out of 3 devices sold in the US K-12 is a Chromebook.
I just had a comment come up that said the stream was down, but I showed that it's back up. So I think we're good again.
It was buffering for a minute.
Which is, maybe we have too many people watching because there are currently 5 people watching.
Oh, wow.
Our largest live broadcast audience, I think we hit 12 at one point. But like I said earlier, we end up with about 350 viewers, listeners at the end of the day. So very excited. Hopefully we can break that record tonight. So we do have a list of questions. Chad, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What you got on yours? Because you had some good questions.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Cyrus, I know you don't remember, but Carl, who is very jealous right now, I'm sure, off helping his dad get some things taken care of. So Carl and I met you at the Google Certified Trainer and Educator meetup at ISTE in Denver. And at that time, Carl and I were advocating for a convertible Chromebook with a world-facing camera. They did not yet exist. Well, they existed after. I mean, they existed in sort of the prototype phase. I mean, and you couldn't really talk to us about that, even though, I mean, as trainers we're on NDA, but I think it was still hush hush. So Carl and I were advocating to you pretty hard for those devices because we feel like that device is going to help us change education. And I mean, we were obviously both very much on board with Chrome OS and Chromebooks in education. So at ISTE, we didn't only talk to you. We talked to some of the laptop manufacturers that were at ISTE saying, you know, what are the chances of getting this thing? How far along are you? And they were all very, very hush hush about that. And then obviously that whole thing kept getting delayed. You know, I was holding off on purchasing refresh laptops, waiting for that world-facing camera to come. So my first question is, what can you tell us about that process of taking a new idea like a world-facing camera on a convertible Chromebook to market? How does that work with the manufacturers? How does that process work? If you can share anything about that.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and you probably saw 6 months after that ISTE, we finally had them, which is pretty cool. And we had even more this year at VET. So it's a great question. So first we have to see sufficient demand for a feature, right? When you add something like that, there's a lot of work on a lot of people. There's cost added to the device. And so
Cyrus, what you're saying is Carl and I's demanding this feature wasn't enough?
Well, it's certainly a good data point, but you really need more than two people telling us before we add something. We always knew we wanted it. But here was the issue. There's a lot of issues, right? On a convertible Chromebook, world-facing cameras are normally on what's called the A panel, which is, so the A panel is behind the screen, the B panel is the screen, C is the keyboard, and D is under the keyboard, right? So all four surfaces have a name. Normally speaking, on any device, the world-facing camera is on the A panel. What happens is, and on a convertible or a clamshell, you're walking around and it just feels very awkward, right? Even on a convertible, you'd have to keep the keyboard, you know, flat, flopping down as you're walking around. Little kids are much closer to the ground. Now they can't see where they're walking. It just felt very strange. What we wanted is that, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And so what we wanted was to be able to flip up the keyboard, have them hold it like a tablet when they're taking video, and then walk around. The problem is now I got to have a camera on the C panel, which is very strange, has never been done. The camera has to flip, you know, has to know that it's flipped, and so it has to flip the image because it's now upside down. And so there's work to do. And so what the process normally is, we think about that, we design it, where do we want it to go? The OEMs were not entirely on board with C panel, right? It's a lot of more work. They have to run wires through the display. They don't want to do all those types of things. So we had to convince them, right? And I was actually part of those emails to convince them that this would be very important. And of course, once we did it, we found out that there were other players that decided that was also a very good idea. So we were the very first cameras to go there. And so then what happens is our platform team, which is an incredible team, goes and looks at what wiring do we need? Can we use a standard internal USB, et cetera? You know, what do we need to do to run that extra camera? What should the specs of the camera be? What resolution do we need? What's available? What's going to be the cost? What's going to be the cost increase? Do we have to spin up a new board? They do a lot of that work. And then we go to the ODMs or the OEMs. We work with them. they get it tested out, and then the product goes through several phases where we can test it out, right? It starts with something called an EVT, it's an engineering verification test, and then it moves into something called a DVT, which is a device verification test, and it moves into a PVT. And then finally is something called an MP, which is the mass production device that all of us play with. And so it takes a very long time. In fact, if you came up with a new feature idea today, you probably wouldn't see that device for at least a year. There's just I guess we're better than cars, which is, on a 2-year cycle. But hardware is a very, very intense game with a lot of players. So that was a long answer, but I wanted to tell you the whole story of how a world-facing camera comes to life on the Chromebook.
Well, no, that's exactly what I was after, because I think there were so many of us that were waiting for those devices. There was word that they were coming, and then there was the delays. So we were waiting to get our hands on those things, because that's a game changer for a lot of schools. If they're doing this one-to-one thing the right way, we need devices that are going to change education. So we felt really strongly about the need for that. And you spoke to it. I mean, it needs to work like a tablet when it's in tablet mode, and that means a world-facing camera on the C panel. I guess I learned something today about what panel names were. So, and that's exactly where Carl and I said to put it. So somebody listened. We want it right here on top of the keyboard. I mean, it made sense, and it makes sense to put it there. So that's awesome. And I had no idea what the full process was to make all that. I mean, some of the hardware vendors sort of spoke to it a little bit, just briefly, but your explanation was much better.
Something I never would have even considered in that process was the need then for that world-facing camera to reverse the image. And so we sit here, and as end users, it's very easy for us to say, oh, how hard is it? These little cameras, they're in everything nowadays. You just put another one here. And now for you to explain to it, it's like, well, now you're going to a whole different location. You're asking it to do something that it was never designed originally to do. I like that. I love that answer. Thank you very much, because, again, we sit here and think as end users, it's simple. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'll give you one. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the other part of that was, the addition of Android on Chrome OS, right? And then it took a little bit longer for the app developers to be able to see that world-facing camera and be able to utilize that. So, I mean, that's come a long way as well over the last year. And again, that's starting to change everything. I mean, the Google Classroom app is way better in Android mode than it is in Chrome mode. No offense to a Chrome OS project manager.
It has annotation support and offline and a bunch of very cool things. To give you one more actually really interesting tidbit, at the same time that we launched the first world-facing camera, we launched Chromebooks. We also launched the very first Stylus Chromebooks, if you'll remember.
Yep.
And an enormous number of people spent the extra $100 to get, or whatever, 80, I can't even remember, right, to get a device that actually had stylus support. But same thing, everyone kept saying, what's the big deal? Just take a stylus. Why can't you just do it? It already supports touch. What's the big deal? A lot of people don't realize there's actually two very different stylus technologies, right? There's the EMR.
We have figured that out, Cyrus. Too bad Carl's not here, because he could speak to that. He has dismantled the active stylus to try to figure out what the heck is going on in there.
Yeah, the active stylus requires charging. It requires pairing. It only works on that one device. You can't take it to. So, and a lot of that expense, and it's $100. So there's 3 downsides to this thing, and significant downside. It's $100 or whatever it ends up being. That's a very significant downside to a school. The problem is, you want something that is $9 that I never have to charge, etc. So you wonder, why is that stylus so expensive? Well, the reason it's so expensive is because it can do things like if I press harder, it will show better, and it has amazing latency. What did Google do? We did something completely crazy. We said, we don't need all that. If you put a little bit of smarts in the screen, and we do a little bit of machine learning, where we actually figure out where your stroke is going, and we draw ahead of where you're actually drawing, you will get not just the same latency as a $100 stylus, but you will get better latency. And so right now, a stylus on a Chromebook has better latency than any stylus anywhere on the market. And you didn't need a $100 stylus to do it. You could do it with the $9 stylus. And I think that just shows when we do things for education, we really realize the teacher's going to want to have a little, cup of 6 extra, styluses, because kids are going to lose them, right?
Yeah.
But that just gives you a sense for, we truly sit and think about all these things because we want to make sure this just works. You can grab any stylus, it can just work. You never need to pair it, you never need to charge it, and yet you still get that same great experience. So
that's amazing. And I often say that, I love what Google does for education, and as an education user, it is so wonderful. And one of the things that we heard that came out of, I'm almost positive it was a BETT, when they said there will now be advanced admin features, but they're going to be for pay. And you get this uproar from people, and it's like, I never had to pay. No. It's like, you never had to pay, but think back before Google what you were paying, and you're still not paying. But in the end, I don't sit there and say Google's altruistic and everything they do for education is simply because they love and believe in education. I think they do, but I also think it is in the end to develop users who like the product, who use it in the business world. And hey, everybody else has done that model. You guys just did it a heck of a lot better. And I'm all for it. And some of the pay products are well worth the price.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Just to speak to the stylus thing for a little bit. I mean, you're exactly right, and the effort you put into that is amazing. We can't have $100 styluses in the hands of kids because they lose their entire Chromebook. Think of what they're going to do with a pencil-sized stylus. They're going to go missing all the time. So the price point on that is incredibly important. A kid can pay $9 to $20 for a lost stylus maybe, but you get upwards to the $100 price point. That's not going to be okay. And more devices were announced with that stylus functionality, and that's exciting news too, because I mean that's where we need to be. We need to be annotating over stuff. We need to be able to draw out our ideas in something like Explain Everything. And we need to be able to do that easily if we're gonna change this thing called K-12 in the right direction. So along those lines, so Stylus, we've already announced some of that. What can you tell us about what is coming up for Chrome in education, if you can? This is a non-NDA kind of podcast. Obviously, it's public. So any little bit of information that you can tell us coming down the line. And one specific question I have along those lines is, there's been rumblings that we go out sometimes and help people get their admin console configured. And one of the common misconceptions or confusion points is the difference between device settings and user settings. I know that's been talked about a little bit even in the community. Anything along the lines of Chrome in education or even the admin console itself? Any little tidbits that you might be able to share with the public?
Yeah, sure. Okay, this is a really great question. So what's coming in user settings? So okay, so when we think about what's coming with Chromebooks, the types of things that our team is responsible for, oversees, or thinks about is when we think about the roadmap of what's coming, there's really 4 categories of stuff. So one is all the stuff that's coming with hardware. Hardware tends to be the most exciting, the most interesting. Our goal in hardware, one, is accessible to all. This is part of Google's mission. It's actually in our mission, right? Making things accessible to everyone. When we first came out, the cheapest laptop on the market was $450. It took 60 seconds to boot. It would get slower over time. That was the state of the laptop market just 8 years ago. We are credited by almost every analyst as completely changing the laptop market, right? We're talking not about netbooks, but full-size laptops that we were able to launch for $199 by our second year. and I push them even harder. The platform team will tell you that Cyrus used to drive me crazy, constantly saying I wanted even lower. And I pushed them to get a $149 laptop out. And you can still get Chromebooks that low. That to me is very game changing, when you can actually not just do cool stuff and do the high end of the Stylus and the convertible and the touch, the LTE or whatever you want, but that you can bring it down to that price. When you can bring it down to that price, you know, you're a third cheaper, and I can share it. It's the most shareable device in the world. I can share it with, you know, 6 different periods. I can use that same card. Well, now it's a savings of 18x, right? It's just an insane benefit. So that's one. The second thing we do in the hardware area to really push the envelope is we put the user first. And we know that, you know, manufacturers really like their barrel chargers and their unique chargers because they get to charge for it and it's a differentiator and whatnot. But it's not good. There's no admin that likes dealing with 7,000 different types of chargers. They don't like rewiring carts ever. It's like, oh, shoot, I guess I went your new model that, you know, from manufacturer A, I've changed their barrel to be slightly smaller. And now I got to go and like do wiring in my carts. And so we, Ken, the very first ones we pushed, in fact, we were the first ones that pushed on the USB-C model, you know, with the consortium for this completely new model where it's a single type. It's interchangeable, it's super fast charging capable, it can do display, you know, it basically does everything with a single charger. But we now require that on every Chromebook. And manufacturers are not happy, right? This is something that they have consistently pushed back on, but it makes a huge difference, right? There will be no Chromebook made anymore that will not have USB-C charging. But the reason this is so important is because it seems small, but it's something that we can do because we control this ecosystem. People are not allowed to ship a Chromebook without not only Google approving it, but every single piece of hardware in that device literally has to be on an approved list from us. We will keep the device here. We run every single release test on that hardware. And of course, it's getting out of hand given the number of models that are out there. But that's how we can make sure that we can, on any given Monday, we can update, you know, whatever the heck it is, 50 million Chromebooks sitting in school. Like, we can do that because we know that update is going to 100% work. It's a very, very difficult problem that people don't understand. I would wish that people could come to Google and see these enormous labs that are set up with every model of Chromebook and whatnot.
Was that an invitation?
I was going to say, happy to come.
Was that some sort of invite?
I'm on a plane.
Yep.
I'm pulling up Expedia to book my tickets.
You are more than welcome. So that is that's in the hardware segment. So there's a lot we do to really not just do cool things with hardware, but to push the whole industry in the right direction, at least the way we think it should be, very user first. The second area, of course, is things that's coming in the core operating system. And there's a lot of cool stuff that you guys probably see. There's a special team that just works on what we call the core operating system, meaning nothing to do with management. But this is the stuff that employees see, students see, teachers see, consumers see. Example would be if there's improvements to the login screen, if there's improvements to performance, if there's improvements to memory management, if there's improvements to whatever, video playback, etc. The assistant feature, right? All of those types of things come out of the core OS team. One of the biggest projects that they're working on is bringing the largest mobile application ecosystem in the world to a desktop, laptop form factor. If you think about the 2 other big players that are out there, you know, one is very dominant in the desktop, laptop world, but what they're lacking is that mobile ecosystem. The other one does very well in the mobile ecosystem, but they don't have that working on an actual desktop form factor yet. Yes, that's coming. And so this is the very first time that you can have a fully productive desktop experience, multitasking, 20 tabs, whatever you want to do. But at the same time, you can have 2 million applications available to you. So it's an enormous engineering effort to do what they're doing. And a lot of people don't realize, you sign into a Chromebook, of course, you get a completely, you know, secure, encrypted partition. Key is, you know, protected by a TPM, all that great stuff. But when you go in and you sign in, we actually launch the entire, we boot Android in the background to get you to, we need the entire stack there to be able to get you to run an Android application. And so you're actually, you know, it's very Inception for those of you that have seen that movie. So that is, that's the second category. There's a lot of engineers on that. The third category is everything around the admin console. And the admin console, as you've seen, and I think you pointed out very well, has two different types of settings, right? One type of setting are what we call user settings. And the vast, vast majority of settings are user settings. And we do that on purpose. They are settings that, that pivot on the user. And what that means is that user will get that setting, that pushed app, extension, proxy, whatever you set, wherever they go on any device, anywhere, managed, not managed. They can sign into a Starbucks-owned Chromebook. They can go to a public library and grab a loaner Chromebook, and it actually even works on Chrome browser. Some features won't, right? Because it's not a device. And we don't charge for them. So if you're a G Suite customer, even in the business world, if you're a customer, you get those user features. We want you to have a great user experience no matter what device you go to. If we charged per user, it would get a little bit complicated because you also have devices. And so what we do is we only say your device settings are the only ones that require a license. And it's a smaller set. But if you want to enforce the user settings, for instance, you really do need that license. Because you can't enforce the user settings if you don't force them to sign in with that type of account, which most, I wouldn't say most, I would say almost every single school admin in the world has realized. It's also why there is no school that we know of that doesn't, you know, enroll their devices. It is the only.
I've talked to, it's amazing still when I do, we do some consulting work, and there are still schools that are like, oh no, we don't, manage the devices. And I'm just like,
but if they do, they may not be doing it for high stakes testing, right? So the real question is if they want to use these devices for high stakes testing, or if they feel they need control and ownership of the device and the data and what the kids are doing on it, then they will need to enroll it. You're right. There actually could be very liberal-minded schools out there that say they don't really need to enroll it. The enrollment is, it's 80% off for schools anyway, so it's not, Google doesn't make some vast amount of money on this $30 anyway. But the idea is, give them a way to enroll the device, lock it down if it's lost or stolen, decide who can sign into the device, set up a device network. Those types of things are what device reporting, activity, which ones have kind of fallen off the grid, who knows what's going on. All those things are device settings. And those are for that specific device only. One thing we've always done, that's another interesting little tidbit, is we never allow device settings to infiltrate your user settings. Once you are signed in as that user, user settings take over. And the reason that's important is because we want the user to always feel completely protected. That's why you never see a device level extension or device level app. Because what would happen is I could sign into that loaner library device with my work account or my school account or my personal Gmail account. And all of a sudden there could be some extension on there that's watching what I'm doing, or some app that I never wanted. So we never allow that to happen. Your user space is your user space. It is protected. It is always secure. And it will never be different based on what device you go into. And I think that's a very, it's also what makes this device so extremely shareable, right? So why it's so difficult for other operating systems out there to become as shareable. You have to do it from the very beginning. It has to be in the DNA of the device. It has to be built and architected as a completely stateless yet personal, which is an extremely difficult thing to do, but a stateless yet personal device, right? So. Yep. And then the fourth category in the roadmap is the application ecosystem. So we have dedicated people just working with app providers out there, and you guys were alluding to that, to make sure that they have everything they need. If they need special APIs or whatever they need, we make sure.
Wow, that's again a lot of info and stuff.
Yeah,
it's great to hear on our side as people that will request certain new features inside of the admin panel or inside of the operating system. It's great to hear what actually is happening on your guys' side and why the process is what the process is. just when you talk about the control panel or the admin panel, going back to the first generation of it. Now, mind you, never the first generation where it was only setting a proxy, but the first generation where as an admin, you had access to different settings. I have to say your UI is so, it's elegant now. It really is. That first control panel was, you know, and as a person who did command line stuff, I was like perfectly fine with it because I had a UI, but now it's just beautiful.
And it's going to get infinitely better. It is going to be, you know, fast for thousands and thousands of OUs if you have them. It's going to have, you know, an Omnibox where you can search across everything. It's going to have some extremely cool features. There's a very large team working on an amazing admin console. So it's only going to get better. And it is probably the single greatest feedback we get from administrators is it is so much easier to manage a fleet of Chromebooks than managing anything else. And you guys know about the huge districts. We have school districts with 180,000 Chromebooks, 160,000 Chromebooks. And many of them, most of them, have not hired additional IT people. That's staggering when you think about, you're talking about 180,000 Chromebooks, and you didn't need like an army of 20 people managing those, right? Maybe that many to enroll them all. But so that is, you know, really a testament to how well these engineers did at designing.
Yeah. Oh no, and that, yeah, like you said, the enrollment process is right now the limiting factor, but there's so many things coming out to make that even better. We work with the GoBox Chrome people and their device, and talking to them, you know, being able to mass enroll. We've talked with the people from Amplified and their Centipede enrollment process. There's a lot of neat features but I'm with you. You know, I'm an IT staff of one for our rollout, and we're at about just under 1,000. Chad has more than that, but again, we're small shops and do it all.
One guy with a bunch of rubber ducks. Go. So Cyrus, you mentioned the last of the 4 teams was the application system team. Are there any exciting integrations coming up with the Google Apps Red and any sort of third-party things you might be able to give us a sneak peek at or mention?
So there's going to be some very cool things coming out, you know, probably at ISTE.
Right. We're a little pre-ISTE. I realize that. So
a few months before, but there are going to be some very cool Chromebook integrations with G Suite for Education.
So a little bit of a teaser there. That's fine. We can wait a few months.
That I think almost every teacher is going to really love. So it's going to be huge. And then the application ecosystem. The biggest thing we have right now that I guess is the most exciting is we never had that issue. We're very fortunate, right? We don't have the issue of trying to convince an app developer that you should really make sure it works on a Chromebook, right? You probably will not run into that conversation if you talk to an application developer that is at all serious about education, right? So that's a very good position to be in.
See, that used to be part of the conversation. So when I was just trying to decide for our district whether to, because we were one-to-one with iPads, and the teachers are so integrated with all of those applications. I spent hours and hours on the phone and through email talking to developers, asking when their Android version was going to be coming out, and that is a conversation I have to have less and less now. So thank goodness for that.
That's right.
That was a frustration. So
well, immediately Android developers now, for the first time, have millions of endpoints available to them, right? In education. And that's a great thing, right? We're talking about 30 million kids using a Chromebook every day. Mm-hmm. That's not a small number, right? So, you know, it's very good. But that means the onus is on us to make sure that they have everything they need. And so there is a very large, what we call a DevRel team internally, which is developer relations, that makes sure everything down to code snippets and anything they need to be able to integrate. There's a BD team, which is the business development team, that is responsible for making sure they're getting any support they need, or marketing support or help. So yeah, we feature a few. There's like a handful we feature at play.google.com/schools to give you some flavor of the Android apps that are there. So yeah.
Great. Lance, was that your question?
So we did have a question from one of the viewers. He had wondered if there was any info you could share on the Cloud Ready investment and basically using Chromebooks, after the, I guess would be the AUE or the acceptable life of them.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone calls it AUE now. I came up with that term one night when I was, and now here everyone at Google keeps saying AUE, and I'm like, I literally made up an acronym because I couldn't think. We didn't want to say EOL because everyone thought end of life meant the device just keeled over and died. And I said the device doesn't die. We just stop updating it. So I think okay. So that's a good question. It was a two-part question, right? Your second part was AUE. What was the first part?
The first part was on Cloud Ready.
Oh yeah, that's right. So we are working closely with them. They're a great team. We are working on a solution. We don't have anything to announce yet, but hopefully soon. If you talk to the partners at Neverwhere, they should be able to give you the new policy for AUE support and for license transferability, because we want to make sure if that device dies, that old Windows device or whatever you're using that happens to have Cloud Ready on it, that you can take that license and move it to either another Windows device, or you can actually move it to a Chromebook. We want to make sure you get that license transferability. It's a really great product. For those of you admins out there that are suffering with older, Redmond machines, and don't get me wrong, I was a Windows user for a gazillion years, so I mean, I used to love it. But for any of you that have one of those, for any of you that have an old Windows device in your basement, you probably know how it feels, right? It's just it is an issue more to do with the fact that for a lot of these operating systems, when an application is installed, it becomes a super user, and it's able to do almost anything. It's able to write all over the operating system. It's able to write in the registry. It's able to do all kinds of things. That's why when you uninstall, it doesn't necessarily clean up all of the artifacts. It's just, and they've worked hard at this, but this is exactly why a computer gets slower over time, because you're only ever cluttering up all of these key components. On a Chromebook, there is nothing allowed to write to the OS, ever. Not one single bit can be altered of the OS. So the OS actually can only get faster over time, right? It's why a 4-year-old Chromebook should work faster in year 4 than it did when you got it, which is mind-boggling when you think about that. The only computer in the world that actually is faster 5 years later. But it's very hard to do it again unless you architect it that way that absolutely nothing can touch the operating system. So, and of course, if the operating system is altered by either accidental or malware, who knows, we don't allow it to boot, right? We actually spend 2 seconds of every 8-second boot to actually check every bit of the OS. And if it's out of whack, even the slightest, it could be a hard disk, it could be anything. We actually don't boot that, and we boot with the previous operating system. There's always 2 operating systems running, saved on the device, which a lot of people don't know. It's also how we are able to update the device while you're still using it. Actually updated to partition B when we were booting, slide over B to A, we test it. If A is looking good, it's a thumbs up. If it's not, we throw it away. So that's just a little bit of background on how it works.
So you said you're just sitting around. You came up with the idea of AUE. Yeah.
It was literally late. Well, I mean, I worked too late, but I think it was 11 at night, and they said we need to update this page, and then somehow I got tasked with drafting the update, and so we completely changed the page. We didn't think anyone would notice, and there was press articles the next day about it. Looking at this very page. Yeah. And truly, to this day, if we change one date of one device in this enormous list of 70 devices, someone notices and says, oh, look. What we did do, by the way, what we are going to try to do going forward is we're going to try to align those dates with the end of the school year, because it is a little bit painful. If a device cannot get updates after April, you're like, what the heck do I do? Can I not use it for the entire school year? Because what if I have a high stakes assessment and I do need to get updates? So I pushed very hard internally. There's a lot of executive discussions, right? Moving out that date is very, very painful for engineering. It's a lot. They have to keep these devices not just in the lab. A lot of these firmwares need to be updated and chipsets. And there's a tremendous amount of work to keep these older devices. I mean, you're talking about pre-Bay Trail devices. There's Haswell device. I mean, these chips are so incredibly old that keeping them running internally, I mean, you couldn't even get Intel to do a patch on that type of device. We've tried. So you can't support these forever, right? It's just inherently you cannot. And so I pushed hard. It looks like we will probably get that. In fact, you should already see for most of them, you should see that going forward, that the dates should now be much more aligned. You should see the vast majority are June dates, meaning end of June. The month actually that we show is actually the end of that month, right? So,
and I mean that's fantastic news, because and it sort of leads into my next question. Is it's device selection season for guys like us. We have to start making decisions on how we're going to refresh or start a new one-to-one. So my question to you is, what advice can you give a district trying to decide what device to choose? You know, where would you recommend starting, and then what criteria would you recommend paying attention to?
It's a good. I get asked several times a year. I get asked this question. I would say, what criteria? So I would recommend. Of course, I'm not going to recommend higher end diverse for us, right? Google doesn't benefit at all if you get a $700 Chromebook or a $100 Chromebook. We don't make any money on it. We give the operating system away for free. And it's open source to the manufacturer. So, whatever you pick is more for you. I would say going for the 4 versus the 2 is very, very good idea, right? More and more is going to require that extra RAM. So 4 gigs of RAM versus 2, I would definitely suggest. If you can go with touch, just given what's happening, given kids are, coming into a world of touch first, if you ever give a clamshell non-touch laptop to a kindergartner, they will immediately touch the screen and wonder.
I'm that way now. I still, so my main laptop is a Chromebook with a touch screen, and I'll pull up one of my other laptops, and I'll be, why is this not working? It takes me a second to realize this is not my Chromebook.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I would say it's worth it to look at that. Certainly, if you can go with the next gen device, which is the Stylus and the world facing, that's of course great. Now you're talking about an incredibly versatile device. You will watch the kids in amazement as they put it in every conceivable. I mean, I've seen them put it up like a book vertically. I put it in a tent mode. They'll hold it like a tablet. They'll do everything with it. So that's certainly kind of top of the line. But those are in the 300s, right? Instead of the below 200. So it's really also to look at the budget, weight, size of the screen. Those are all factors. Durability is usually important. So yeah, I don't know if that helped. I would say the biggest one I would say to focus on is the RAM, and probably the hard drive is, the SSD, right? Try to go for the 32 and not the 16. I don't think there's almost any 16 sold. We looked at the numbers. There's a very small percentage of 16s are still sold. There are people that still go for the 16, but all you do when you have a low partition like that, or a low overall disk size, is you end up blowing away more partitions, more user partitions, which is kind of annoying, right? That poor kid comes back and they're like, oh, my stuff, So, because the device will do that, right? It will take the LRU partition and throw it out. So it is good if you can kind of go for a little bit more, especially with Android. Apps tend to be larger, etc.
Especially if it's a shared device. I mean, not so important with one-to-one, because there'd be one user partition.
Right. If it's a one-to-one, then all of that is left. The 4 gig is still important, but the SSD space may not be as important.
Right. Do you still have a CR48 sitting in your office?
I do, not in my office, but I have one at home. Yeah, I do have it. Yeah.
That is, that was world changing. I had a follow-up question, and it went out of my mind when we started asking my first one.
And I know, so in a lot of our audience is not NDA, but I did want to ask, and just whatever you can or cannot say about it, but at BETT, a picture leaked of a Chrome tablet. Again, something that I think could be a big game changer also. Our littles, we're a 1-to-1 Chromebook in grades 3 through 12, but K1-2, we still use the iPad just because of form factor. Would love to see a Chrome tablet from a management perspective, from a usability perspective, that type of thing. And of course, to keep things common throughout the entire user experience, K through 12. What can you say anything about that?
We do get asked a lot about that. The people, they like the security, the shareability, the manageability, but they want a different form factor. We have nothing to announce at this time, but usually these are OEM-led decisions on when they are ready and when they want to launch or announce anything. So we have to respect the NDAs that we have with the OEMs, if that makes sense. So, but yes, we do hear you. We know that this is something that we also, before we can do something like that, we have to also make sure that the user experience can be fully touch ready, meaning you don't have the escape hatch anymore. Now, there's Chromebook convertibles where you can flip it over and use it on touch, but in a worst case scenario to flip it over, but you guys know this because you're admins, but enrollment, right? Control-Alt-E.
Yeah, how do you do that on a touch screen? Right. But I mean, just a tablet.
On just a tablet. So these are things, the escape power refresh, right? For power, like all of these things you need a way to do. So yeah, it's not a small effort. There's a lot that has to go into engineering. Is it going
to be like the old Android resets with power button volume down for 10 seconds back to the dead Android?
Well, we don't know that there is anything yet, Chad. So we're not going to ask if that's how you do it.
So I would say stay tuned, right? And maybe this is a question for you guys. Actually, do you have good ways to provide feedback? Are those mechanisms working for features, for products, that you do want to tell Google?
Well, we just corner you at ISTE every year. I don't know if that's working or not.
It appears to be. We keep getting what we asked for. So, no, we do. And we talked about people too. Is that the feedback within, whether it's in the admin accounts or any of the apps, you always can go down to the feedback return. There is the I can't remember what the forum is, but you can actually vote up or down product requests, those types of things. We've been there. The community, the Google Plus community. A lot of people ask for stuff and then get linked to the feedback forum so that, and say, can you vote this up, vote this down? I think those are great places to go to.
Like the accented A thing just a couple weeks ago. You couldn't type an uppercase accented A with the 2 dots as the first letter of a name. So we voted, a bunch of us voted that up.
So, yeah. But I just want to make sure I hear you clearly. Google has no intention of using this platform, the GSFE Admins podcast, to make world-changing announcements like the President of the Chrome tablet.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But no, I
thought we were almost there.
We were almost there. It would have raised our ratings, right? If we could.
Through the roof.
Through the roof. But yeah, every time I present, I mention to people, did you know that like actual people at Google read this feedback and it works? You have to hit the little button. And screenshots are great. I've had developers get back to me based on something that I put in there with a screenshot. So if you pose good ideas with screenshots, they even ask questions back, which is amazing to me. So I think it's working.
You guys get, this is not ideal, but if you type in crbug.com, you can actually go in and search for almost any feature request that you could possibly imagine is probably there. But what's really cool about, we don't just open source, but we do open development. We means this is actually where all the source code and everything happens right there on this chromium.org page. But if you post a feature request that you don't see, please search first, because if we do it, we just have to dedupe it with something else.
Yeah.
So search well. If you don't see it and you post it, you will actually get a product manager from Google or an engineer responding to you about, oh, that's an interesting idea. We'll think about it. Or could this work as a workaround? So you can start a dialogue, which is very cool, right? I don't know that you can do that at many companies, where we actually have a completely public and open forum to ask questions and actually get directly to an engineer.
Well, and when you go and vote for a request, you get added to that thread. So whenever there's an update by anyone, it pops up in there. So
yeah, even if someone just changes the priority, you'll find out. And yeah, star those requests, right? Star the features that you really like, because product managers do look at that, right? I many a time I've gone to engineering and say, come on, this thing is starred, 600 times. It's probably.
And I may or may not encourage people to make multiple accounts to go star something they really want.
That is insane.
You'd have to have a lot of accounts, I think. That's
really.
I even may encourage them to build bots to do that exact things. But
at some point, we will think it's fake.
You maybe.
No, and I've always said, and again, I'm not. I'm definitely a Google fanboy, but there are things that we point out to that Google has listened to education in a way that we just haven't been listened to before. That was really kind of cool. Like when Classroom first came out. And they said, yeah, and we're going to put this out, I think, in October. And everybody said, what? In October, but school starts in August. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, that's a good point. We probably should open it up. And they did. And they had it out there for that. And it was kind of the same type of thing. Is I know there's work on the education side where people are really trying to, well, like you said, the AUE matching up with school schedules so that it's not going to, be non-updatable in July, or in April, when school gets out in June. So we really do appreciate it. It's amazing. And again, like I said, I think you're going to develop users that will take you into the business world, and pay your salary, because you aren't going to get paid by us in education, unfortunately.
And I think it's already happening. More and more, you talk to people in the business world that mention, yeah, we're all Google. I mean, and even just a couple of years ago, you never heard that. So I think it's working already. They just see, the collaboration is just amazing, and that's what people do now, right? They need to collaborate, and it
works. The collaboration pieces work.
Right. The others are just trying to catch up and not doing it very well, in my opinion. So that's great. One of my follow-up questions, did I just mute myself? What happened?
Nope, we got you.
Okay. My audio is weird. Anyway, one frustration that I had when we made a new device selection was parts availability. We selected a newer device, and it was difficult to get parts of any kind for that device for the first few months, and it's still not exactly easy to get certain parts. My question to you is, does Google set any sort of regulations on manufacturers and part availability? And if you don't, I think it might be a good idea to do so, just because that was a huge frustration. We're K-12, and I bought my, certain percentage of overage, but our breakage started going over that. So we actually had to start passing out old Chromebooks, ones we had refreshed out. We kept some, obviously, for this instance. But it was a huge frustration. So my question to you is, does Google set any sort of regulations on manufacturers? You're going to have parts to fix these things. They're going to kids. So
no, that is a good suggestion, actually. I don't know if we do, right? There's a different team that handles all that, but that is an interesting question. My guess is we don't, right? That's something that they normally do as part of, operating as a large OEM.
Right.
My guess is, pressuring them and saying, if you can't turn this around, I'm going to go to, XYZ, Dell, Lenovo, HP, whatever.
Sure.
That could help get you that part sooner.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good one.
Well, and I appreciate you listening anyway. because I mean that was big for us. We actually ran out of loaners and had to start passing out the old stuff again, which weren't. I mean, we had chosen a convertible model, and the kids were starting to use it in such a way. And when they try to convert an old clamshell, it doesn't quite work.
Right. Or it works too well, and now it's
Now it's a tablet.
where's your tablet?
Awesome. Well, we are coming up against our timeline here. Everybody's time is important to them, and we want to thank you very much for being on here, Cyruss. I cannot tell you just how exciting it was to actually get to talk to you, to have you on the show. Hopefully, the audience is excited as we are. I think a lot of it's kind of how the IT world is. We like to sit and listen and get, and just have the person express it to us. So thank you. Couple of things coming up here. So this summer, we talked about it here. There is going to be in ISTE is going to be in Chicago this year. So if you get a chance, come to ISTE. Carl and I will be doing a workshop Sunday, June 24th, 12:30 to 3:30, selecting and managing Chromebooks in education. And then Sunday morning, I have a session that is best practices, educational account security, Sunday morning, June 24th from 10 to 11. My Sunday is all about Google and all about presenting. And then I actually hopefully will get to enjoy the rest of ISTE. Our next podcast will be live. We'll be doing it from NETA. That's the Nebraska Educational Conference in Omaha. So Thursday, April 19th at 2:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We will be doing a live broadcast from NETA. Always a fun experience when we get to be together in the same room. And then lastly, this summer, July 19th and 20th. Am I right on the dates on that one, Chad?
Yeah.
You look okay. July 19th and 20th, the Google for Education Admins Conference in the Wisconsin Dells. Cyruss has agreed to do a hangout session with us. I'm excited again about that. Kind of one of those things. You get to bring in some big names, and it makes it a lot neater. So this will be our second admin conference in the Dells. If you've never been to the Dells, think about it. Good family place, good fun place in the summer.
Lance, you said the 16th and 17th, right?
No, I think I said the 19th and 20th. It's the 16th and 17th.
You're right. 16th.
I asked you to check the dates on me.
I did double check. I think last year's 19th, 20th.
Okay, so 16th and 17th. There we go. All right, so 16th and 17th of July in the Wisconsin Dells. Hit me up for if you need any information on any of that. So once again, thank you, Cyruss. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Any last words from anyone?
Phil, we need more Phil.
Yeah, I was
Need more Phil. You were very quiet again tonight, Phil.
I know. Darn it.
Darn it.
He gets shy. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have yourself a great time. Until next time, take care.